Amazing. All right, so welcome everybody to this webinar called Mastering Fundraising for Startup Success. I'm here sharing the conversation with Roi Sagi, which has an amazing background. He's an ex-Google and Criterio Nasdaq company listed at tech companies. He has two-time startup founder with success fundraising experiences and over 15 years of experience driving commercial success among operational efficiency and leading transformative initiatives. Don't let me lie, Roy, is that true?
That's true. You have definitely depicted it accurately, and thanks for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, so I'm Camilo, new business lead at Remoti. And the overview of this webinar is to explore the key factors that people and founders face when they are fundraising, right? So we'll be determining success and failure for early stage startups. And yeah, like discussing real stories and being human about it, right? So we explore a diverse array of topics. Our aim is to provide our audience with a comprehensive understanding of the industry's current landscape and how to start looking to have fundraise or just to hear another story of success, maybe not so success. So yeah, sure. So I'll start with the first question, right? If it's okay. So as someone with experience in fundraising, what strategies have you found most effective in securing capital for early stage ventures, right? So particularly in the competitive startup landscape.
So first of all, I think that if you look at the markets, when I raised twice, the latest one was for a blockchain-based startup called Embed. We are developing, our vision was to change the way that value is distributed across the internet, tokenizing engagement, and instead of the value going to the big platforms like the Google, Facebook, and whatnot, the value goes to the data creator, right? Instead of to the platform. So when we raised money, it was early 2022. We raised successfully 4.5 million pre-seed. And that was a crazy time in the market, right? It was the peak of the bull market. So I'm not going to tell you here that the strategy is wait for a bull market to raise, right? Because that's not going to be very efficient. But timing definitely has a critical component to it. We literally knew we could see the bull market coming. So we compromised on having an amazing investor deck. We compromised on doing things, and up until to the nitty-gritty details, but we went fast. So first of all, when you know that you have a favorable market condition, go fast, go to talk with investors. So that would be number one. My talk is relevant for pre-seed and seed startups specifically. So I'm not going to talk about round A or round B strategies, which are very different. I'm talking about the phase where in the pre-seed and seed, you are selling the team, you are selling the magnitude of the idea, and you are selling the ability to execute. Right? Round A is already around traction and so on. Round B is about scale and a certain element of growth. So we need to keep that in mind. So first and foremost, I think it goes without saying team, but when people say team, I think there are certain elements that helped us really shine in the face of investors. So first of all, superstars, right? It goes not only to the founder team, but for the first employees. Do not compromise. I know it's easy to say, easier said than done. But obviously, you co-founder, you choose because you believe that he or she is a superstar, and they have the ability and the track record. So that's obviously a given. But your first contributors or employees or providers or contributors, as we have them in the blockchain space, got to be people that when you put them in front of investors, they say, wow. Which means that if you're looking for your first, architect, blockchain architect, you're not taking, someone that is almost next to, can be, has the potential. You're taking a superstar now. Later on, you can diversify your team and split between the juniors and the seniors and the type of experience and the years of experience. But my recommendation would be do not compromise. So that's critically important. The second one that we need to remember, especially now that we are not in the bull market, is around networking. So we all know, hopefully everyone on the call was raising funds or participated in that, knows, to create a sales pipeline for investment. So you have the golden number of between 150 and 200 investors, angels or funds. And I'm not gonna, obviously talk about the obvious strategies of going to Crunchbase and tracking investors and who has been active in the last 6 or 9 months and the average check size and all the hard work we need to do, but a bit of the extra. So start with your network. If you are not a first-time founder, then leverage your network. Even if you are a first-time founder, leverage your network with angel investors who might know you personally or know you from first relation, because we have as humans unconscious bias towards stuff we know. You will get your foot in the door, you'll get a conversation. So that would be number one. What helped us as well was to build, we started to send kind of newsletters to some of the investors and VCs that we wanted even before we were officially raising capital. To keep you in their mind, to raise the awareness. I think it's a very valuable trick, and it allows them to be kind of a warm lead when the time has come. I think the other component is, as much as you can, have investor FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. So we were very lucky. We raised 4.5, but we were oversubscribed by 8 million. Sorry, to 8 million. So almost double, right? So obviously the markets are different, but a very good tactic for investors, if you are product-based companies, is talking with investors and telling them, look, we are about to launch our MVP, or we have signed our first design partners, or we have secured this B2B deal. We are not raising yet, but know that the minute we get to our first 20 customers, 5 design partners, MRR, valuation is going to be high, right? So if you enter now, you have that opportunity. And obviously, if you have your first maybe serious angel or 1 or 2 VCs, it's very easy to go to the next one and say, look, we already have money in the bank. We are choosing our investors based on, the criteria that's relevant for you, if they're from the right field, if they can demonstrate track record, and kind of reversing the narrative, creating a bit of FOMO, because if the investor is going to come back late, then the valuation might be higher. And again, remember, if you go to the right investors, or the ones that are deploying capital, they raised money for a fund, right now they have to deploy. They are under pressure to deploy capital. So the sweet spot would be investors which their funds are, deep into operation. They have some money left, but they've got to get rid of it. So obviously choosing funds that had similar investment to yours, but investor FOMO, I think is critical. The other advice is, do not waste time on investors that do not understand your industry. I'm not against generalists. I'm not against vertical agnostic. But from my experience, and I've talked to probably, with the 2 startups, maybe 400 investors, maybe a bit more, you will waste a lot of time and energy, right? And again, I know it's easy to say because when you need money, you're going to talk with whoever comes. My advice would be hyper laser focused. And they might refer you, even if they cannot or are not interested, to invest in others. But that is important. Networking is important, critically important. And FOMO, creating the FOMO is very, very important. And I think the other element, which is quite important, is to ask the investors that even express interest, right, to introduce you to other investors they believe are the right ones. Because what we have found, like a Venn diagram, we don't always get to all of the investors that were actually interested in investing. For multiple reasons, we categorize their funds or the investors in the wrong vertical, or that investor, appears to be, the fund appears to be closed, but they actually still have capital. So ask your investors, can you introduce me to angels or friends or other VCs you believe would be relevant, right? And the rest is kind of the normal approach. I would say that in blockchain in general, I would go as much as possible to raise money after I have somewhat of a community, right? So we all know that at least in Web3, community is a very good proxy for success in deploying your product or service, right? Crypto is all about community, and that comes mainly from the marketing world, where running normal ads, right, paid ads in Web3 doesn't really work. We all know about Twitter and Discord, and we need to create communities and buzz around the product. So that gives an opportunity to do that, to create a buzz, to create a following. We gathered maybe 30, 40,000 followings before we went to raise funds and then increase that number. But I would advise to have a community, even without a product, that are passionate about what you're doing and go to investors and say, look, we might not have traction, but we have a proxy metric towards traction. So that would be something that I think is important. And then other topics about founders, but we can talk about that a bit later.
Amazing, Ro. Really relevant information. I think you gave like 3 or 4 insights really important for every founder. And for example, you mentioned the importance of networking, industry knowledge, clear business model, obviously, and for early stage startups, we're focusing on this conversation. So, and you mentioned a lot about deciding who to investor to decide to invest in you, right? And if it's not one, refer to the one who is the industry leader and like have some patience and not to get ahead of yourself just to have money. That's tough. That is tough for everyone, like for every founder, because everyone has to like, go to market and develop the product, the MVP and everything. So how can founders not only secure the initial funding if they found the industry leader, but how can also create a sustainable growth trajectory with them? As you said, like the referrals with another ones, they have to be interested in investing in you too. You give that example, but is any other like strategy to delve that in create a sustainable growth?
Well, I think you're talking about 2 different things. If you're talking about fundraising or sustainable growth, right? So these are very two different things. Which one do you want to tackle?
I mean, when you accept the first amount of the first investors, first batch of investors, how you can elaborate and build the relationship with them to have a good relationship in the long term, to have a sustainable growth with them.
Yeah, I think that's something we can import from the Web2 world, not necessarily that much different. So I was very strict with about monthly investor updates. And you don't have to have any update with something flashy and incredible, and we've signed 1 million customers, but you do need to bring them along, especially because in Web3, unlike Web2, you have less of a digital footprint necessarily, right? You might be working under the hood, building architecture, deciding on how to deploy the smart contracts, what will security look like. So a lot of stuff that's not directly visible versus creating a web app in Web2 and deploying it. So monthly investor reportings are really critical. What we've done is made it our business to take the top, I would say, 30% of our cap table and actively use them as our advisors. So most serious funds in Web3 have headcount behind helping their startup. It can be, something light, like the ability to consult with them about any kind of topic. So for example, you are not sure about which market maker to choose or, what approach and so on, all the way to headcount by specific role. So one of the big funds that we worked with had headcount around product, had headcount around token launch, had headcount around how the hell do you do marketing in Web3. So I would make it my business to meet those, people within the funds, not necessarily the LPs and not necessarily the investment committee, but every other week to consult about what we do, also to have visibility, to give them visibility to what we're doing. And I would say more often than not, these meetings resulted in not only relevant information, but strengthening the relationship with the fund. So for example, if your startup might need a bridge loan before the next round, if your startup might need an introduction, for example, we worked with DCG, Digital Currency Group, which are extremely well connected, right? So these kind of intros to other service providers were key. Now, when it comes to growth, I think it's less, directly about the fund. It's about you executing on what you promised. But keeping investors informed, especially in crypto, utilizing their resources and knowledge and network, I think that's a key component to keep them happy, but also make sure you're getting ready for your next round. Because when we talk about runway, I think while it's critical and important to plan, it's also important to be able to raise funds ahead of time if need be. So for example, markets were kind of problematic, but we are seeing now an uptick in the market. More money is coming in. We obviously expect, I can also see movement with investors. Sometimes you might want to raise money ahead of time. And by doing that, you are able to at least keep the warm relationship with investors. Still, you need to execute, talk about KPIs, but we can talk about that in a moment.
Amazing. Great insights, Roy. So you mentioned about a lot of being transparent and being honest. Communication is key. Planning for the runway. Don't, if you need more, you have to get ahead of your team and don't let anything become a surprise. So I'll skip to the next question, Roy. And it's about more about you. So can you share a specific fundraising success story from your career that highlights innovative tactics or approaches you employed to attract investors and secure funding?
So as I said, one of them was in bed. We raised $4.5 million in 30 days, which was awesome. I'm not going to lie, it was great. A lot of luck. As I said, we were at the peak of the bull market. The timing was critical. So we started end of 21. We quickly identified the bull market. We said, it doesn't matter. We need to prepare an investor deck and start talking. Start appearing in front of investors, compile the list of investors, and so on and so forth. Most of the tactics I shared before were from, our success story. The previous startup, which is in prop tech, property technology, we raised also $1 million, relatively very quick, but applying the same tactics. So we identified a short list of 20 funds that were, hyper-focused on what we were doing, which was, dynamic and virtual credit lines for the real estate world, deployed with technology. We decided to start in Europe. So we were trying to see funds that operate, beyond the sub-region. So not a fund that's only in the UK or only in Germany, but funds that treat themselves as European or Western Europe and so not. The other thing that we've done early on in both startups is we enlisted top advisors before we went to our investors. So I'm talking about people that would be recognized in the industry without explaining what they do, like literally brand names, right? So we invested, I would say, in the beginning, even more time identifying, finding contacts, talking to and signing these investors as we invested in investors. Sorry, these advisors as we invested in investors, right? Because if you're able to get, a superstar in your field, believing in what you do, and then you go to investors, it gives a bit of de-risking to your idea. If a subject matter expert, aka an advisor that believes in you, then the investor says, okay, I like the team, I like the idea, the market is big enough, and we have a relevant third party that is willing to put their name on your deck. So I think it's a very important strategy from that perspective. I do say that as much as possible, if you pass, usually the first test is with a lead generator on the investor side, not with the decision maker, usually a young analyst. If you are able via a meeting to get to the investor, meet them. Also, a trend we are seeing today is investors, especially the big ones, like to meet in person. Because in the beginning, they are investing in you, in the person, in the team. So there's something, I know it's not always possible. If you're in Singapore, you're raising money from New York, you're not going to hop on a plane every now and then. But if you can batch like in the old days, meeting investors in person, I think it gives a huge advantage because at the end of the day, they are meeting you. And if they're able to meet you in person, there's an element of de-risking that relationship.
Amazing. And funny how you talk about the face-to-face, because in our job in Remoti, the most essential thing about localization and building teams, real teams, is to have them present and to actually the remote thing is here to stay, obviously, remote jobs, but the localization is very important. So if you're going to build a team, for example, in Latin America or in Asia or in the States or in Europe, you have to have the whole team in one place for them to regularly meet, and build the company that you sell to the investors, right? Because if not, you're going to lose the cultural organization, the values of the company, and yeah, the runway is going to be much less if you are only by cost effective and not only like wise in a wise manner. So Roy, the impressive thing, you raised 4.5 million without a CTO in only 30 days. That's huge. And you talk a lot about having top advisors. So what's the first step to get a top advisor, like a brand advisor, if you don't have it?
Yeah, I mean, that's $1 million question, right? So I don't know if there's a formula to replicate. I can share now what we've done. So first of all, I was lucky that in both of the startups and the third one I was involved with, the founders were really my partners were awesome, right? They were people with experience. They were people that have already, done one or two things in their lives and their fields. So the network was already quite huge. So honestly, I would say locate and target, identify and target the right advisors. And when I'm saying the right advisors, it's very easy to go after someone that is famous, but not necessarily relevant for what you do. So, you might have I don't know what, an NFT project, but actually what you're talking about is, I don't know what, sustainability. Your person might not be from Web3. It might be a subject matter expert on that field. Now, again, generating leads and finding these top advisors, sure that people that can give you 1,000,001 methodologies. But at the end of the day, utilize your network as much as possible, get an intro, meet with those people, get them extremely excited about what you're doing. Right? It's not about the deal or the equity or the compensation. It's about really making them excited about what you do. And as with investors, I don't know how many, if at all, advisors we have on the call, but it's creating that FOMO. Right? So for example, we really decided not to have more than 4 advisors. And we decided to have 2 in one field, fourth one in a different field. And we told the potential advisors, look, we have certain seats, we have, one allocation for this type of advisory or different allocation for that type of advisory. I think it's an opportunity. We have obviously others waiting. It's really making them understand that you are not, creating this big team of advisors, but a very small, unique and elite, small team. So that's one. The other thing is, usually advisors like to advise. They like to appear, they like to speak. And if they don't like to speak, they like to meet. So if your startup secure the speaking gig in a conference, it's an opportunity to bring your advisor with you. Tell the advisor, look, if you sign, we have a main stage appearance and this and that conference, you can come with. Right? The advisor has an inherent interest not only in the equity or options or tokens that you're giving them, but also in making sure he gets more of these tokens and options in the future, aka their reputation. So if you can help them improve their reputation, I think it's a bit of an easier sell. And again, those who want to advise probably are good at it. They have other options, other alternatives, or other startups. It's about really demonstrating to them the value you can give to them. It's a bit tricky in the beginning. They need to trust and believe in you. But doing that, and again, this is applicable to Web 2 as well. I think what's different about Web 3 and now AI is it's new. So you have the advantage of, if you want to get an advisor for a supermarket chain, it's probably not going to be as easy because it's quite, common. In Web 3, if you're handling a niche or an area that is less tapped, it's going to be a bit easier to get advisors. If you're doing a fintech project, a DeFi project, obviously it's going to be a bit more complicated. It's a saturated field. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but your discussion will need to be a bit unique. So for example, one of our advisors was really keen to build their own community. So we allowed them to interact and engage with our Discord community, happily doing so, inviting people from our community to join his. Suddenly it became like a co-marketing initiative, even though that advisor was bought in and had to contribute and had his KPIs. But these are some of the maybe, wouldn't say secret strategies, but I would say more pinpointed tactics that can help you speed up your first advisor. And it's tough, right? Advisor first, investor first, how do I, right? It's always the case. And I think the same goes from pre-seed to seed, maybe even from seed to round A. So it's not like you got advisors, they agreed to be on your website, can go to sleep. The type of advisors you will need moving from seed to A will also be a bit different, right? And you will be surprised on the title advisor at that stage. So brand name will help you get investors, will help you get clients, but a practical operational advisor will be able to get you to the next product stage, which will get you the next investment. So I think it's very important to identify. We literally built a matrix of, which advisors we have in the market and what each gives. So we don't have maybe duplication in a certain position, or we don't have redundancies and so on. So I don't think it's about the secret strategy, but it's about externalizing the value, showing the value that you can give to them, to the advisors, not only the other way around, creating some FOMO, which always works, and externalizing and sharing the stage when possible and when relevant with these advisors, conferences, webinars, and so on.
Amazing. And really relevant information, right? Thank you for that. And I was just thinking with the latest question, the past question about face-to-face meetings, and you said that you decided to only have 4 advisors. So I think in our experience for Remoti and our expansion and our growth and success, developing long-term relationships by going and meet the people, like actually take a plane, go to where they are and take the time and have a lunch on a proper 2 days with and explaining everything with details, creating the formal, as you said, it's really important. Like these digital connections and relationships are not only for us in our experience are not sufficient, right? You need to actually put the importance. If you have, for example, a webinar, put the jacket on. Like you can work on a t-shirt every day, but if you have an important day, build the day, like from the moment you wake up to the moment that you're going to sleep. So thank you for your insights. I think they were really, really amazing, especially the ones from the advisors from pre-seed to Series A, because you'll think that the advisors that took you to the Series A, the pre-seed and the seed will be the same that will take you to the Series A. So like not having this marriage, like this long-term relationship and the contracts, and deciding being wise on that is, I think, it's very helpful for the founders and the people who are looking to raise some capital at this moment. Amazing. Okay, so in your opinion, what are the key considerations that founders or entrepreneurs should keep in mind when approaching fundraising? So in tech startups, especially in light of evolving market trends and investor preferences, as you mentioned in the last question, AI and Web3, there's ever an evolving market. So yeah, but what they should keep in mind for that.
Well, I'm thinking again, it's a lot of what we talked about, but also about the founders themselves. So I know, again, if you already have a startup, it's fine. If you're looking to or considering a co-founder or adding a second or third co-founder, I think it first of all starts with the co-founders. So the number one, I would say, criteria, or number one factor that impacts success in early stage or failure at early stage is partner or co-founder compatibility, right? So we talked about, I'm not going to repeat what we talked about, but from the founder perspective, highly recommend, making sure you have the right co-founder and that you are the right co-founder for the others. So what does it mean? Again, there are many startups that don't operate necessarily like that, but my belief is you need previous experience with your co-founder. You either work together in a company, you either have, you are friends from the university, you were in a different startup together, you have some sort of previous relationship. And the reason is is that you will encounter so many uncertainties and disappointments and challenges and pivots and investor pressure that when you go to investors today, at least from my experience, investors evaluate your probability to succeed as a non-romantic couple, right? So when you go to fundraising, that's definitely a critical criteria. The other things are a bit more common, like in Web2. So for example, timing, choosing the right investors. Again, we talked about this before. Is the fund active or not active? Have they been operational in the last 6 months and so on and so forth? Are they in your field and industry? Again, don't repeat what we said before, but I would maybe spend more time on the co-founder compatibility.
Okay, amazing. Sorry. So if you have an idea and you have worked with somebody in a startup or you haven't, how you know that is the right one for you? Like, for example, you have past experiences with X with your friend in 3 years in a startup, and you have the idea and you're very motivated and you think you have the what it takes to run the difficult times also. But what are the key questions to ask yourself or your co-founder, and what conversation should you have to actually know if you can make it with that person?
Oof, these are, good ones. So again, the first thing I would say is, in my opinion today, with my next venture, I need to have previous knowledge with that person. As I mentioned before, there needs to be history because history basically de-risks or minimizes the risk of handling things when things do not go well between you. You don't blame, you do blame, you work well under pressure, you prefer no pressure, you work, in person, you prefer remote, and so on and so forth. So that would be a critical first criteria. Second of all, I don't know if you know how many people know, but the famous Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of PayPal, book From Zero to One. I cannot emphasize enough. The person can be a superstar in corporate. It doesn't mean necessarily that he's going to be great in a startup and vice versa, right?
Okay.
So the startup is the journey from 0 to 1. It's that movement of thinking you have the right product, believing you identify the right target market, and trying out, right? Ideating, validating, and so on, which means you're going to have many changes. Most probably the product you will end with is not the product you started with. Most probably you will do a pivot. Most probably the target audience, the persona, is not the one that you are talking about. I've seen it time and time again, including in my startup, that people without startup experience, or even not necessarily a founder in a startup, but worked in a small startup, very difficult, the learning curve to be comfortable with ambiguity, to be comfortable with change, to be comfortable with uncertainty. It's very, very difficult. People understand it here, but they don't understand it there. I'm not saying it cannot work because all of us had our first startup at a certain point, but real examples from my case, one of my previous co-founders, he worked in corporate and in startups before. Paper, great. But when I deep dive, I realized he worked in startups of 300 people and more, which means that if you have a problem, there's a ticket, there's a team, right? There's some structure, there are processes already. But a startup of 10 or 20 or 30 people doesn't. A startup of 30 people, you might not have a product manager or a product designer. You are supposed to do it. You might not have someone to give you the P&L. You are supposed to do it. So I cannot emphasize enough our previous experience as a co-founder in a small startup, doesn't have to be in your industry, plus knowledge and experience of working with that person in person. Again, can be colleagues, can be boss, can be school, university, hackathon that you decided to do, smart contract challenge, whatever it may be. But I think that is extremely critical. Now, once you have that, I think there need to be at least 2 conversations that are then reflected on paper. One is a co-founder agreement. It's the traditional legal doc, which you can find templates on the internet, right? That basically kind of regulates legally the agreement between the two. I would say the second part, which is more important to me, and I've done it only the second time after having, learning a very expensive lesson on the first startup, what I called a co-founder value principle agreement. So this doesn't have to be drafted by a lawyer, but you can write it in your own way or your own format. But I did ask for us, the co-founders, to sign it. And there you talk about, given that you have previous knowledge, given that both of your experience is relevant, there you have the discussion around the core values and how you see the business. So give you the simplest example. When do you exit? An offer comes from you are a startup, you're early stage, you have no customers, you've been running for a year. An offer comes to buy you out for 20 million. Do you sell or not? One co-founder will say, hell no. We got 20 million now. Think about what's going to happen when we have clients. Another co-founder might say, you're crazy, 20 million now, and we own, I don't know, 50% of the company. Let's take it. So these kind of conversations should happen. What are the ways you want to manage your company? So I worked many years in corporate, many years in Google. Though I'm grateful for the opportunity and the experience, I'm kind of fed up with the politics, with the indirectness. So me and my co-founder, literally one of the values was no bullshit. That impacts a lot, because if your first employee is someone that's extremely, delicate and requires a lot of, sugar coating, it's not bad, but it's not a good fit. It's just not. Or vice versa, right? What's your approach to remote work, hybrid or in person? All of these things that do not find their place in a co-founder agreement, you've got to talk about them before you start. What happens if someone leaves? With all the luck in the world, one co-founder has a child. He cannot work the 80, 90-hour weeks like before. Is it fair? Does it mean a change in equity, change in compensation? God forbid one co-founder gets sick, has to leave. What happens then? Does he get tokens for his contribution? Maybe not. So all of these things, talk about them before, and put them in writing. The other recommendation I would have, the minute you get funds, strong believer in that, take an executive coach specializes in co-founders. This is not a luxury. If you think about it, going back to what investors are investing in, there are two methodologies for valuation. You can take each one, but at the end of the day, main components are the idea. If they feel or think it's a big idea, the size of the market, this is how you quantify the size of the market, the ability to execute, and so on and so forth, but mainly the founders, which means that this founding team is the number one most important factor for success, assuming that you have all the other skills. So put that money, not a lot, find a coach that knows your industry. I think it's one of the best types of spend you can have as an early stage startup.
Amazing, beautiful. It's like a marriage. You have to define everything beforehand, and you have to be
100%.
very, very clear about that decision, because, as you said, different scenarios, different situations may come in that you didn't anticipate, and you have to have mostly the trust and the signing of the person right beside you to manage every situation that comes. So yeah, I like it. If you could send our attendees your formula, the questions you have to make to the co-founders.
People are happy to reach out privately, and I'm happy to share, because for some it's not relevant, for some they have their own, and so on. So happy to share offline.
Sure. So you just said a lot about misconceptions and people coming from corporate, and you think because they were in corporate they can manage the startup, or because they have managed a startup of Series A or maybe 300 people, they can understand the earlier stages. Quick advice on adaptability, like how do you manage a person? Because I think it's not black or white, but maybe how do you recognize a person's adaptability capabilities to enter as a co-founder or a C-level role in an early stage startup?
So first, I don't distinguish for this question between co-founder and C-level. I think, de facto the founding team, which is the founders and the extended, the small first team, are one. So it's not easy because everyone will tell you that they are resilient, that they are great with change, that they can, will give you examples from their past. It's all good. But what we found is the environment, the instability and insecurity of a startup is very extreme. They don't say, they say it with a lot of reason behind it that being a co-founder or founding team is one of the most difficult professional experiences there are out there. I don't have a magic formula on, how to update it or how to evaluate, sorry. But first, I would look at tactical or practical evidence in the person's CV. Have they worked in a startup before? What was the funding stage of the startup? How many employees were there? You can be around a startup with 300 employees or 30 employees. It's not just about around. A really deep dive in what environment did that person work in, right? So that would be definitely number one. Two, I would look at that startup as much as possible. Did they have any changes? Did they go through hardship? Usually every startup does. How did they come out of it? And then deep dive into that person's experience and CV. What was their part in that startup journey? Okay, you were the CTO. What did you do? The first weeks you you design, you think it's all good. But once you started to burn money, a few months in or a year in, crypto might be longer for the development, might be earlier if you're doing, an exchange and you can generate income from day two. But what did that person specifically do when the crazy period starts? So for example, suddenly you announce you're on testnet, you go to mainnet, boom, you have 1 million users. What did specifically that person do? Did he manage a team? Did he code? Was he on the security side? Right. What was his or her part, when the startup started to move? Because in the beginning, when you debate and design, it's okay, it's discussions. Everyone likes to discuss, right?
Yeah.
But specifically, what was their role? Obviously, second of all, the evolution of the startup. So was that person there for 7 months or for 3 years? I had talked with a serial CTO who was great, but he always was 6 or 7 months. So if you join and continue and leave many startups after less than 1 year, you're probably very good with ambiguity, but you're not very good at staying. Vice
Yeah.
versa. If you joined and you never left for 8 years, it's also good, but might not be for what you're looking for. If you're a DeFi startup, the contrary, you might want someone that's been doing DeFi, doesn't want to change. So it really depends on your needs, but it's not easy to evaluate the person's propensity to handle ambiguity well. Again, to summarize, looking at the experience, deep diving between the lines on the CV, what exactly did they do, would be a great one. And give them a challenge, not a technical one, but literally ask them, look, imagine we raise money, but we have 4 months to deliver first milestone. We have 4 months, what do we do? We can burn the money on whatever we want. You very quickly how see this person thinks. There's no right answer. A more traditional person might say, I want to manage the budget carefully. Reckless person might say, let's burn the budget on marketing and get some outsourced engineer and figure it out. There's no right or wrong, but understanding the person's approach to where do they put their time and focus on.
Amazing. And I like the answer because you can think in the same way with the advisors. Like you have to understand if the CTO you have or the head of engineering you're having is the one for the first 4 months, the 7 months, the year, or you have to keep making changes, or you develop that advisor or that same CTO for the long term. So it's all connected and in the way of thinking of building the company. So amazing. I think we only have 10 minutes more. I have more questions, but I don't know if we can do like a Q&A if people want to.
Yeah, I can see already a bunch of questions in the chat.
Let me check. So anonymous attendee. So someone asked, what sort of information is important for investors in a pitch, and what sort of data are you sharing in the
Yeah.
present?
Maybe we go to the first question first, which is once we have identified investors, are we doing a group call or are we pitching individuals? To me, 100% individuals, right? You are creating a personal relationship with the investors. This is not something you pitch in a group. Again, if you are part of an incubator or even an accelerator, or they are now angel groups, so the setting is such that you pitch to a group. But if you source the investor in the beginning, they're investing in you and you personally, because they like the vision, the numbers, the deck, and you, your face, the way you articulate the idea, you're right. It's very personal. I would not take the personal element out of it, again, unless the format requires that, which then it's perfectly fine because the idea is to have a panel. Also from a divide and conquer perspective. So even in our very successful round of 4.5 and 30 days, we had one very famous fund that literally told me to my face, this is bullshit. So I don't want the other investors hearing that. And eventually, we succeeded in raising. So I would divide and conquer as much as I can for that question. Yeah.
Super. So let's take on the second one. So what sort of information do you take, and what do you think is important for investors in a pitch? What sort of data are you sharing?
I mean, very good question. First of all, format. I would definitely follow, either the Sequoia or one of the famous you can find online, problem, solution, market, and so on and so forth. I would start with team, but anyway. So what information? Team, as I mentioned again, they're investing in the people. So talk about the co-founders and if you already have a founding team. I'm not talking about the visuality of the deck, right? You can check that online, but highlight if you have any brand names in your CV. I had Google, I put it front and center. My co-founder had a very relevant experience, front and center. Anything that can work for your advantage. The usual stuff. Define extremely well the problem. I'm going to give hypothetical. I'm not selling earphones. I'm selling small wireless earbuds that last longer, that are water resistant for a specific market. Like be extremely, extremely specific as possible. Obviously, the market size is very important, even though in Web3 it's a bit different. So Web3, you're usually selling the ability to be disruptive. You're not, doing another Uber Eats or another, car sharing app, which we are going to do better, more efficient, or whatnot. You're trying to sell a fundamental shift. So play on that and explain where you fit into the crypto value chain. So there's the famous Andreessen Horowitz. I highly recommend watching their videos about the value distribution across the value chain of blockchain, right? So from the server layer to the blockchain layer, right? The consensus layer to the protocol and smart contract layer, application layer, right? You can find it online. If you can map yourself where you are in that value chain, investors are very quickly going to put you in application, huge audience, a bit low margin. How do they get volume? Explain. If you are talking about the protocol layer, it captures a lot of the value, which is amazing for investors, but you will have to explain your go-to market. Focus on that, right? The rest of the data is the normal data. As I mentioned, problem, solution, market, team, go-to market if it's relevant for you. And what is usually also common in the blockchain space is roadmap. Don't make it as boring as a endless list of a roadmap, but really try to depict your journey if you have a token launch from now, from where you are today to token launch, right? I would put it maybe around, how you get your first users or participants, how you work on your community, not only marketing wise, but how do you get participants to eventually drive value to your token or demand to your token, your journey to token launch and why you are going for a token launch at a certain point, very critical, very, very critical. And again, the rest is the normal data and budget and whatnot. And what you're going to spend your money on, the usual stuff, be high level, give yourself room for flexibility, but follow the normal path of problem solution market and so on, because that's right. Again, as I said, with the differences relevant for blockchain that I mentioned before.
Amazing, Roy. Hope that answers the question. I think it was very valuable. Someone else asked if you, in what cases will you advise raising funds, and in what cases it's better not to do so?
Very good one. I don't have the magic answer, unfortunately. I can tell you that when we raised money in the peak of the bull market, we raised way more than we needed, 4.5 million. We were oversubscribed to 8, and we had a big internal debate. Should we take the 8 or not? And I'm talking about pre-seed, pre-product, pre-users, except for the community, nothing. So back in the day, we thought we don't want to take more money to not dilute the token pool, right? Not dilution in the traditional sense, but not deploy more tokens. In the bull market, we said, oh shit, we should have taken more money, right? So a very high level, I would say, in the market of today, take more money than you actually need in order to be ready for a rainy day, but not if it means giving too many tokens, right? So again, if you are a token-based, you need to make sure that your community, as a rule of thumb, right? Community and allocations have a significant amount of tokens. In my days, it was 50%. Today, it's a bit lower. So be very, very careful not to give too many tokens away to investors. Otherwise, community will not perceive it well. We all know that game. When and what cases? So it really depends. If you generate revenue fast, right, you don't have to be fully bootstrapped, but I would not necessarily wait with fundraise, but I would time the fundraise to where I have minimum traction, because simply the valuation can be higher, you can give less tokens. If you require heavy development, I would not advise, to use outsourced. I would raise money now. And if you get negative feedback from investors, that's a great tool for you to know either your idea is not that great, either the way you want to go to market is not that great, or your technical solution doesn't create enough of a differentiation. So to summarize, again, if the question would be a bit more specific, we can talk about which cases is the question referring to, but be careful with the sum of money that you raise, not grab all the money that's there just to get money, but I will take a bit more than what I need, knowing what I know today.
Amazing, amazing insights. And another person does ask if Remory have any examples of building C-level teams. And yes, we does. We do. We're working, for example, we work with Roy in Embed because we work in a partnership with Node Capital, with this VC on Web3, and we get to know Roy and in another early stage startups all around the globe. So we have helped them understand their vision and helping them place the localization, as we discussed in the past conversation, if they need a CTO or a head of engineering with what experiences. So not only on the tech side, but only on the country managers and the CEOs and replacement of seniority, like high seniority level. So we have been doing that in a global scope for different type of companies. We have working alongside Roy, and that's why we're speaking with him today. And hopefully we can help him and the entrepreneurs on this call keep escalating, keep building, like making this world better with more solutions and digital solutions on the Web3 and Web2 spaces. So I think we are out of time, right? But Roy, it was an amazing conversation with you. I think you gave, in a nutshell, a lot of insights that people are looking for in the internet and they don't find. So this is being recorded. I invite you guys, the ones who are attending, to share this. This is being recorded. You now know Roy, so you are one click of distance of Roy. You can DM him or me if you need more information, if you need any advice, regardless the position you are in the company you're building. So yeah, that's it. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much for you. And again, guys, I feel the pain. So if anyone has any specific questions or whatnot, don't hesitate to DM me, either LinkedIn or wherever. I'm happy to, as time allows, to chat, to give specific advice. as much as possible to help the ecosystem.
That's amazing, Roy. And thank you again for the time and the conversation. Hope to speak to you very soon. And bye-bye. See you guys.
A good one.